Boom! Yes, folks, Hume again. How will it go in? How will it go in? So in this video, we're going to talk about the whole question of voter turnout. That is a hot topic these days in the election season because, as we know, this election is a different election in that the traditional modes of campaigning wouldn't be applicable, right? The public meetings here and there and the massive crowds in the rallies and things. In this time of social distancing and masks and safety protocols, that wouldn't be a question, that wouldn't be on the table. So, given the fact that the campaign will be carried out on social media, primarily, the question is being asked, what will the voter turnout be? What we could expect where the voter turnout is concerned. Good? So what I'm going to do in this video is play up with the numbers a little bit, give you a sense of what the mathematical model that I would employ would throw up. And of course, we're going to inject some non-mathematical common sense and instinct into the thing and get some kind of sense of what we could expect to happen, of course, leaving some space for what might happen, the unexpected then, so to speak. All right? Before I go any further though, I want to take a little time to throw in a little plug for my online platform for those of you who are doing CSEC Maths in January 2021. Right? I want to make a strong and fervent appeal to the people who even thinking about doing the exam in January. Start your preparation now. We're already more or less in the middle of July. After that is August. Right? Once you hit August is September. Now, once you hit September, right, case closed. Right? You're now in a situation where you barely have time. And at that point, if you're not prepared to spend maybe 2 to 3 to 4 hours every day, because you know how Chinese are in December, all concentration cease, right? Christmas, parang and thing. If you're not prepared to put 2 to 3 to 4 hours every day in September, from September, October, then you know what the story will be. Good? So start the preparation now. Make a hard push now, June, July to August, so that come September you'll be rolling. You won't be now cranking up to start in September. Alright? My online platform is a good place to be if you want to start your preparation early. Alright? We wouldn't have any online, any face-to-face classes, sorry, as yet. But online you have the videos. You could check it out at your leisure whenever you want. You could wake up 2 o'clock in the morning and do maths if you want. If you're working and you're on shift, that is not a problem. You check it out whenever you want to check it out. Okay? So of course, if you want to find out more, you could WhatsApp the number 293-5712. Stay in touch with the video and I'll give you the link a little later. Or you could go on the Facebook page, check out the video. And if you're not sure what I just do and how I just do it, it have other videos there too. Get a sense of how I just do the thing. Check out my other maths videos, right? The last one I uploaded was a video on some common maths mistakes people make, common mathematics mistakes. Alright, so we get it out of the way. Now let us talk about the elections, the voter turnout. The first thing we want to do, of course, is define what we mean by voter turnout. The voter turnout is simply the percentage or the proportion of registered voters who actually go to the polls and vote. So, let me make it simple. If you have 10 people registered to vote in a polling station, and 5 of them actually go out and vote, then your voter turnout is half. 5 out of 10 is half, better known as 50%, right? The voter turnout is generally expressed as a percentage. So if 7 out of the 10 go, your voter turnout is 7%. If 8 out of the 10 go, your voter turnout is 80%. Now, voter turnouts in Trinidad and Tobago do generally hit 80%. But, strangely enough, in 1956, the voter turnout was 80.2%. And in 1961, that's the highest voter turnout ever, it was 88.1%. So in them early days, I guess less people, the political climate was a little different. And you would have had voter turnouts in the 80s in those 2 years. Everything else after that, more or less between 60 and 70%. But we'll get to that a little later. Alright? So, in terms of the national voter turnout, I would have gone to the EBC website, looked at all the figures from 1946 straight down until 2015. What I did, however, for analytical purposes, is that I used a particular statistical tool. The statistical tool is called linear regression. Alright, so this is one of those cases where those of us who would not have been exposed to linear regression, don't worry about it. Right? This is where you had to have some degree of trust in the person that's talking to you. Alright, I would have been exposed to this for the first time when I was doing applied maths in A-levels back in the 90s, and I would have used it in my teaching time in UE when I was tutoring statistics in the Faculty of Social Sciences. Right? And of course I would have done some private work with people who doing the masters and whatever. Yeah, we use the regression there too. But this is the first time that I'm actually using it in a real world scenario where something really happening, and we have to take a mathematical tool that we would have been using in hypothetical situations and apply it to a real life scenario. And of course, when you're doing that now, we have to adjust to the variables at play. Alright, and the application might always be as exact as the textbook might tell you to do it. And that is how the thing is. Right? So even though you could do the maths, you had to be willing to get down in the trench and just apply it and just use it as best as possible. So we use this tool called linear regression, alright, from 1976. Why I chose 1976? Because in 1971 there was a no vote campaign. Alright, a no vote campaign led by A.N.R. Robinson. He was the head of the DAC, the Democratic Action Congress, if I'm not mistaken. Right? He would have had a falling out with Eric Williams in 1970, if I'm not mistaken, and then he would have split from the PNM and whatever. Of course, if you want more details, talk to the older heads. Right? They would be able to give more information on that. I myself have to go back and talk and get some more precise information. But that is what I can remember off the top of my head. There was a no vote campaign in 1971. So that would be an aberration, an anomaly. So I don't want to include that in my analysis. So I started from 1976, which is fair enough. And using the regression tool, I would have been able to make a projection. Right? The regression allows us to make a projection, and the projection states that the voter turnout in 2020 is supposed to be 71.4%, which would be higher than anything we would have gotten post 1961. Right? Now, here is where we need to inject some non-mathematical common sense and instincts into it. Right? We didn't get 71.4% in 1986 when we had a big blowout of the PNM. Right? The turnout in that year was 65.5%. We didn't get 71.4% in 2010 when we had a massive anti-Manning sentiment. In that year, the voter turnout was 69.9%. All right? In 1991, when the whole country came out to vote out the NAR, the voter turnout was 67.5%. Alright, so we didn't get up to 70% in those particular political climates. So in this particular political climate, where there is not any sense of any major event taking place, any major sentiment running on the ground, we really shouldn't expect a voter turnout as high as 71.4%, even though the mathematical models say that. So in other words, you give yourself the confidence and the liberty now to deviate from the mathematical result, from the statistical result, because of your knowledge of what's happening on the ground. Your non-mathematical instincts are very important in these things. And there are certain kinds of information that you will never get from a statistical analysis running through a computer program. You had to go on the ground and check it out. You had to walk the streets. You had to talk to people. You had to listen to the news. You had to read the papers. Good? So, 71.4%, no. We shouldn't expect anything. We shouldn't expect that at all. right? And given the fact that since 1991, the average difference between the actual voter turnout and the projected voter turnout is about 3%, right? Where the projected figure was higher than the average, than the actual figure. Then if we take 3 from 71.4, 71.4 minus 3 is 68.4%, which would take us in the region, well, it's actually not in the region, it's the exact figure as the voter turnout in 2001. So in 2001, the voter turnout was 68.4%, which we would get in 2020 if we take away 3% from the 71.4% as outlined. So I would put 68.4% as our upper ceiling, right? If we get anything over that or anything even close to that, that would be a surprise. If we get 67.4%, I think, sorry, if we get 67%, I think that would be a good performance. That would be a credit to both political parties in terms of being able to bring out voters in an environment where the normal modes of campaigning don't exist. Now, the tricky thing about it, and this could possibly be the spoiler that nobody saw coming, we know that between elections, in between electoral cycles, we always have a certain amount of people being added to the electoral list. And that happens when people turn 18. So in other words, you would have a certain amount of new voters every year, right? Every election cycle. And if by virtue of the campaign being in a social media space, which is a very strong and powerful domain of young people, younger folks, right? If the political parties could find a way to reach the younger people where they are, right? So in other words, for example, if the political parties decide, well, all right, young people on TikTok, let we go on TikTok. In other words, so you don't stand up on the corner waiting for the young people to come to you. You go to the young people where they are. Engage them, talk to them, engage in some kind of political education, right? Engage young people. Sometimes when you engage young people, they might surprise you. They might shock you. All right? So that is a little gray area there for political parties. So in other words, targeting the same people you are accustomed targeting, no, that wouldn't work in this election. Right? If we want the voter turnout to be anywhere close to the normal figures, mid to high 60s, then they had to do something different. And because we're in a situation where you have to do something different by force, right, by virtue of the fact that we're in the COVID season, then that may actually turn out to be a blessing in disguise for any of the political protagonists who could take advantage of it. So this is an opportunity for political parties, if they're savvy enough to reach out, to tap into that body of young voters that are coming up. Go and reach them. You never know. They just might surprise you. Right? We wouldn't have to try. So we have a situation where if the older people vote as they are accustomed voting, in terms of the normal, the regular, what's it they're looking for? The regular culprits in terms of voting. Go out and vote. Some vote for PNM, some vote for UNC, some must switch their allegiance as they see fit. Alright? If the regular people vote, go and vote, and then of course some wouldn't vote. Some people be vexed, me voting. The turnout in 2015 was what? 67.3%. Turnout in 2015 was 67.3%. So if we take 3% off of that, now we take 3%. Again, random figure, but guided by certain things I see in here. Now we say if the voter turnout under normal circumstances is 64%, between 60 and 64%, then if with an infusion of young voters, you might be able to bump that up. But that is up to the political parties, right? The ball is in the respective courts of the political parties at play, they now have to go and grasp that vote. And on social media, you don't have a choice. Go and do it, right? So, all things considered, I think I don't expect the voter turnout to be as low as most people expecting it to be. People, if we have to put a figure, I think most people probably expecting a voter turnout below 60%, because the lowest voter turnout that I have on this list here is 63.1%. That was in 2000. That was at the end of Pastor Pandey's first term. All right, 63.1%. So low 60s, right? If we use that as a guidepost, all right, we might get a voter turnout of 63%. We might get a voter turnout a little lower than that. So maybe 60, 61%, right? Let me say 60% as a floor. If the voter turnout is anything below 60%, then the political parties need to kick up their backside. And I say that with no apology. Both political parties, because it means that somewhere along the line, you would have failed to grasp the opportunity. Because at the end of the day, you could still reach voters, you know. Right? We in 2020. We in the age of social media. Everybody have a phone, everybody have WhatsApp. Right? Everybody on Facebook. If they themselves not on Facebook, somebody didn't know on Facebook. So alright, some of the older people might be on Facebook. But guess what? They have children on Facebook. They have nieces and nephews on TikTok, Instagram. Alright? So again, the political parties have no excuse. They cannot use COVID as an excuse if they get a low voter turnout. If we get a low voter turnout, then chances are there will be some other factor at play in terms of how people feel, in terms of the sentiment on the ground, the moral of the voters, right? That's a different discussion. That's a different discussion. Right? How that will affect the actual result of the election, I will probably delve into that a little more later, right? What would happen if we have a higher voter turnout? What would happen if we have a lower voter turnout? What would happen if the voter turnout stay the same in terms of being in the regular band of, let me say, 65 to 70%, right? 63, 64, 65%, straight up to about 68, 69%. All right, so that is basically it. All right, what I will do, I will do a short little video where I actually show you the graph and show you how the graph fluctuate. You will see what we refer to as the trend line, right? Excel calls it the trend line. In regression, you'll know it as the line of best fit, right? Basically, what we do, we take the points and we sketch a kind of graph that best fits the pattern that we're observing, and that is the line that we use to make predictions. Of course, there will always be room for error in these things, so nothing is perfect, right? There are times when the projected outcome is very, very close to what actually happens, and then there are times when the deviation is significant. Yeah, so it's nothing to lose a sweat over, but still we could get a sense of prevailing trends by looking at the numbers. So I will take you into the graph now, but before I do that, I just want to remind you of the Road to January, my online platform for CSEC Math students doing the exam in January. People who are doing the AdMaths in June 2021, hold on a little bit, just wait a little bit, I have something coming up for you too. And the nice thing about the AdMaths is that if you take the AdMaths, you're getting the maths free as well. So it's a 2-for-1 package. What is the price? Maths alone, $500 TT for the rest of 2020. AdMaths, same $500 TT for the rest of 2020, inclusive of the maths. Right? So the AdMaths people, if you hold on a little bit, you're getting maths and the AdMaths. And yes, you could pay me in person. Yes, you could pay me by bank deposit. Yes, you could pay by credit card on the website. Yes? So with that now, I'm gonna turn you over to the graph to just end the video to show you, give you a slight sense of what we see when we're doing the analysis. Of course, I wouldn't go into all the gory details, but I just want to share a little bit with you. Right? Remember, this thing is not obia. Alright? So when we talk about making projections and making, you know, it's not obia, it's solid mathematical and statistical principles. So I'll turn it over to the graph now. Alright, so here we have the Excel output, the graph that we would get. Alright? So these would have been the different points on the voter turnout graph, right? This is the 60% line here, this is the 70% line here. So as you would see, most of the figures hovering below 60 and 70%. Alright, this is the equation of the straight line. This here is the what we refer to as the trend line in Excel. The official regression vocabulary for it is the line of best fit, or the least squares regression line, whatever. The terminology is beside the point. The important thing is that what takes place is that we take each of the points and we try to find a kind of average, and we take one line that represents the general trend of the points, and we use that line to make predictions. So this would have been the final figure here. This will be the figure for 2015, and based on this line we make a projection, and this here is the figure for 2020. So based on this trend line, the voter turnout for 2020 is expected to be 71.4%. But of course, we would have discussed that earlier in the video and decided that no, we're going to go a little below that based on some simple non-mathematical phenomena, non-mathematical knowledge, instincts, knowledge of what taking place, etc., etc., etc. So just a quick run through. I would have started the analysis from 1976. Alright, so in 1976 the voter turnout was 55.9%. In 1981 the voter turnout was 56.4%. In 1986 the voter turnout was 65.5%. In 1991, the voter turnout was 67.5%. Now, most people, just based on anecdotal knowledge, we would expect that 1986 would have been one of the highest voter turnouts in the history of our elections, based on the simple fact that the PNM was wiped out by 33-3. But that is not even the case, because in 1991, the voter turnout was actually higher than it was in 1986. So in other words, the population, having given the NAR a resounding mandate in 1986, then switched gears in 1991, and they came out en masse to vote out the same NAR in 1991. And they came out with even more force in terms of numbers by a full 2% extra. Good? Now, from 1991, we move down to 1995. This is the end of the first Patrick Manning administration. The voter turnout then was 63.3%. So you get a sense here of the population now kind of dropping in terms of the approval rating of the government, if we measure that approval rating by the overall voter turnout. And at that now, in a situation like that, you find that the UNC would have won for the first time outside of a coalition. Well, not really, because the election result here was 17-17-2 in 1995, 17 PNM, 17 UNC, and the 2 NAR Tobago seats. And of course, we remember that the NAR then had a coalition with the UNC to make it 1917 with Pasdio Pandey as the Prime Minister, governing for 5 years, after which in 2000, the election result was 19-16-1. Alright? So we had 19 for the UNC, 16 to the PNM, and 1 to the NAR. So in other words, we had a same kind of tightrope, right? the government with a slim majority, and here now is where we started to get allegations of corruption, the house in London and all of that. And here too is where Trevor Sudama, Ralph Maraj and Ramesh Lawrence Maraj would have parted company with Bastia Pandey's UNC, leading to the calling of an election in 2001. Now, between 2000 and 2001, the voter turnout jumped from 63.1% to 68.4%. That is a jump of 5%. That is a significant jump on the national average, and that kind of jump, it must have something that driving that. In that case, we could say that maybe there was a strong sense of the population wanted to get the UNC out in terms of all the corruption allegations that were taking place at the time. So by 2001, even with the higher voter turnout, we had another deadlock at 1880, and this deadlock now had to be resolved by the president, who at the time was Ian Robinson, who would have made Patrick Manning the prime minister then, right? And those of us old enough to remember, we remember that speech about moral and spiritual values. Hot topic of debate, etc., etc. Again, for the younger folks, talk to the older people and get some historical information. So 2001, of course, at 1818, you can't really run the country at 1818. So we had to get another election in 2002. This time the voter turnout climbed a little more to 69.6, and at that point then I think it was 2016 at the time, PNM got 20 seats, UNC got 16, and then from 2000 we moved, the voter turnout dropped from 69.6% to 66.6%, and then from 2007 to 2010 we moved from 66.6% to a high of 69.9%. Alright, this is the highest percentage that we have had in the post-1976 era. And then from 2010 to 2015, the voter turnout dropped from 69.9% to 67.3%. So, on the face of things, we could expect mathematically the voter turnout to be somewhere in this region here, right? Somewhere along this point here. That is between 60% and 70%. Somewhere inside it. There are people who even expected it to drop below that. But as I would have discussed earlier in the video, you never know what could happen. Alright? So that is basically it. Right? You get a sense of what we see when we do the diagrams. Alright? Of course, a lot of background tabulating the figures would have gone into this, and thankfully we have Excel so that we don't have to do all these calculations manually, because as you get into more and more figures it becomes quite tedious. Alright, and I mean we have technology where to use it. This here is the equation of the line that I use. Don't worry about it, that is part of the whole regression thing. For those of us who do in CXC maths and they have to do straight lines as a topic, this here is one of the applications where the understanding of what happens with a straight line, the understanding of what the equation of a straight line means, could be a big tool in allowing you to understand what's happening here. Now, of course, like most mathematical models, we have errors, and one of the errors that I want to pinpoint is the fact that even though on the graph the points appear to be evenly spaced, right? The years, the electoral cycles that they represent are not equally spaced. Good? Because they would have had 76, 81, 5 years. 81 to 86, 5 years. 86 to 91, another 5 years. 91 to 95, 4 years. 95 to 2000, 5 years. 2000 to 2001, 1 year. 2001 to 2002, another year. So we would have had 3 elections in the space of 2 years, for those of us who remember. Alright, 2002 to 2007, 5 years, and then 2007 to 2020, 3 years. We had a snap election here, and then 2010 to 2015 we had another full 5-year term here, and then of course from here to here we have another full 5-year term, 2015 to 2020. So even as we make projections, even as we manipulate the figures, even as we extract certain information that we could use, it is always helpful to be aware of the variables at play, to be aware of the mathematical variables at play that could influence the result, to be aware of the non-mathematical variables at play which could affect the result. And in the whole scheme of things where this statistical tool of linear regression is concerned, there is a lot of attention paid and consideration given to the degree to which there are variables that you can't really account for, variables that could affect the result. But of course, this video is not the place for me to discuss that. I'm trying to break it down as much as possible so that as many people as possible could get a little sense of what happens, a little sense of how we do what we do, so that when people talk or when people say certain things, you can say, alright, yes, you could kind of feel it and get us. You're not so disconnected from it then. Alright? So that is it for the time being. And I want to tell you, look out, we have more videos coming. Alright? Basically, we'll be doing something similar to this. For each of the marginal constituencies, we will talk about the non-mathematical factors, what our instincts tell us. We will play up with the numbers a little bit. And yes, as much as possible, I will actually share the graphs so you can see the thing, you can see the pattern playing out before your eyes. Alright? So keep good, take care, spread the word, and look out for the next video coming your way.